Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm your host, Gamby, with my co-host, Brandon. And before we start the show, I wanted to ask you something. Does Tavares live rent-free in your head too, or is it only all other Islander fans?
I don't really think about him at all. I kind of, with them playing Toronto, the only thing that made me think about Tavares was the fact that he scored. I was like, that's probably not going to go over well. But beyond that, I was just, I'm over it. When I think about Tavares, I think about the Leafs now. So I think that's that if the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Tavares is blue and orange, then I think you're going to have trouble like realizing that it's definitely over and you can leave the dude alone at this point. But
so you don't sit at home in your chair quietly chanting, "We don't need you." You just let that go.
No, I was really trying to come up with something to say about my life that I do that to, but it just all was too rude, so I just left it alone. Couldn't think on my feet quick enough. That's what I chant about you when you're talking. There you go.
There we go. That's what it is. Okay. That's actually what everyone chants while they listen to the podcast. Whenever I'm on air in their car, they're sitting there chanting, "We don't need you."
This is something you should not have started, because that will happen.
Oh, it will happen. I hope people are actually singing along with me. I bet you so many people feel so seen right now. They're like, "Oh my God, he agrees with me." And people say we're not self-aware. See? Okay, so let's start off the weekend episode with a 10 takes. I'm going to start here with my first one. And we had a tweet this week that I think that got a lot of attention. And I wanted to bring it up and have it as a discussion point here, and especially early in the episode. And the tweet was about trades. I called out someone who had sent me a trade that was Hutton and JT Miller for Vasilevsky and Timo Meier. And to me, that is the most offensive trade I've ever received in my life as a fantasy player in years. Like, that was just beyond offensive, I think. Just from what do you think of the player and everything. So I wanted to give a quick talk about how, in my opinion, and I think you tend to agree with this to an extent, is that in my opinion, winning trades is overrated. I think it's better to work towards a win, but you don't start with an attempt at fleecing.
Yeah.
If you start with an attempt at fleecing, you screw yourself in negotiations. You screw your opportunities to make a trade in the future. You never know if it'll get around the league and hurts your chances to trade later. There is a potential for a trade there, potentially. Like, I would happily trade with this person. But the fact that they did that now is like, I don't even want to deal with you now.
It just blows up counters, to say the least. And it makes me, when GMs do that to me, especially more than once, I just think like, I can't trade with them because they're not going to have proper value. So I get the idea of sending a trade where you're winning, but you got to, like, if you're thinking about the other side of this trade and you're like, I would be annoyed by this, then don't send it. Like, you can send a trade that, I don't know. It's kind of tough because I still think the best way to actually trade with people is like try to form some sort of like personal relationship with them, like actually talk about players, not necessarily a personal relationship, but at least a hockey relationship with the person. Harder to do in random leagues, but in like, your hometown leagues, you kind of will get a feeling for what people are thinking about in their team, and then you can target the players that you think they're undervaluing. And that way you can win a trade. But when it's about like a random person, or if you're like just kind of essentially cold calling somebody with the trade, if you send like a bad trade, they're either going to let it sit there forever, which is annoying for you, or they're just going to outright decline it, which is what you should expect anyway.
Yeah, what you should be doing is sending an offer that makes some sense. Usually what I'll do is if I'm in a cold call, I'll send an initial offer that clearly has me winning a little bit, but it's close enough that the person says, okay, this player may actually make sense for my roster. And then it starts a conversation or starts a counter. That's what you really want to do is you want to intrigue the person enough that they want to counter. And that's how you start to play. But sending something where you're outright fleecing someone. And you know what? The truth is that I don't even really see the point in doing it with players that don't know what they're doing. Even if it's a player that doesn't know what they're doing, say you send a trade that like kind of makes sense. And then they offer these ridiculous players. You're like, sure. Yeah, I'll totally do that. Then fine, that's cool. But if you're gonna outright fleece someone, I just don't like it. I know that you're supposed to win trades and that fantasy is a game and all that, but I think that it just hurts your future negotiations way too much.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this is a rabbit hole we could go down, so I think we should probably, because we've had I don't know, half an hour to an hour long episodes about just trades. And I'm sure there'll be another one. There's probably going to be a 101 about trades one of these days. But
yeah, I think there should be a 101 about trades. I'll let you take that so that I don't get too flustered.
Okay, my first one. This is super interesting because I was actually rostering this player up until the moment that the news came out, and that's Ilya Kovalchuk is essentially working on a release from his own contract. That's pretty nuts. Like, he's actually been one of the better Kings so far this season as far as point production. He's been played third and fourth line, but it's kind of top-ish power play sometimes. I don't know. I thought they were going to give him a little bit better of a better shot once Willie D was out, but I'm guessing Kovalchuk just still rubs people the wrong way, and this is the second time he's essentially tried to escape the NHL because he doesn't like what's going on or whatever. So I think this is the last we're going to see of Kovalchuk in North America, unless he's on vacation.
Or if the team wants to take a gamble on him, which is possible,
I don't know. I have a feeling he's not going to. Maybe, I guess. Detroit? No, they wouldn't. Like, I don't know who would. Somebody who might make playoffs but is struggling for a winger and doesn't mind the fact that Kovalchuk seems to not work with anybody at this point.
I don't know. I think it seems like I don't know if he wants.
Could you imagine?
I don't know if he wants ice time at this point or if he wants a cup. I mean, Edmonton is an interesting fit too. I don't know if he'd want to live in Edmonton, although I guess the cold isn't that different from Russia's cold.
Yeah, you think you'd feel right at home.
That's true. Right. Okay, my next one here is going to be on the Tampa Bay Lightning. I want to remind people, because we've seen a lot of stuff, and I know I did this last week too, but Tampa has only played 15 games. And it has not been a consistent 15 games. Over the last 2 or 3 weeks, they've only played, I think it's like 5 games or something like that. And so when you're looking at rankings of these players, they're very, very under-indexed, because they just haven't had the opportunity to actually play. Now, granted, a Braden Point is frustrating regardless, but when you're looking at like a Kucherov or a Stamkos, they're fine. They're doing fine. The fact that they haven't gotten you anything is because they haven't played.
Yep.
That doesn't help a Sergachev or anything like that. So when you're evaluating a Tampa Bay Lightning player, especially in a trade right now, what I'd look at is the average stats and not the season total, because they're behind.
Yep. I think pretty much most of Tampa is a good buy low candidate right now. Literally all the superstars. So anybody you draft in the first 3 rounds is somebody you can probably buy a little bit low on right now, depending on how much the team that's owning them is struggling and how little they're paying attention to the games played. Yeah. Okay, my next one is, we took a week off. We didn't talk about Dallas in the 10 takes, but they're back because Dowling is now center 1, Pavelski's center 3, Sagan's playing the wing, and Radulov was moved to his off wing. And then they won. So, oh God, I really wish they did not win the game on Wednesday, but because those lines are just weird, and I don't know why any of that makes sense. But yeah, I guess that's what we're gonna do now. Sagan, a little aside, Sagan basically, I don't know, you can necessarily say he called out Jim Montgomery, but he basically said, yeah, we're not scoring goals because we're not being allowed to, and yeah, I'd like to score goals, but as long as we're winning, I guess, is essentially the quote. You can look it up, but it's yeah, I'm not surprised. You can look at the numbers of kind of Dallas's goals for over the seasons, and once Jim Montgomery became head coach, they dropped significantly because there's more of that defensive style, and Bishop came on board and was good enough to buoy them anyway. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like there's still trouble in the waters over there, which is not very surprising.
The other person that has trouble in the water, and specifically the Hudson, aside from pollution, is PK Subban. He is still not top power play.
How long did you think about that Hudson joke?
Literally 2 seconds. That's why it's bad.
Oh. I mean, yeah, you've thought about jokes way longer than that, and they've been much worse.
Yeah, that's true. I've planned things that are worse than that, which is, I guess, kind of sad or good. I don't know. I don't know how to take that. But Subban is still not top power play. A worse joke is that Will Butcher played 61% of the power play last night. So we're back to this. So Will Butcher, 61% of power play last night. PK Subban still not on it. I put him on drop candidates. I've given up. I don't see him getting top power play at this point. I'm curious on your take, but for me, I'm done with PK Subban. This is about as much of a death sentence as you can ask for. If we give, I think that while the name is a name, right? You have PK Subban. You know who he is. He has name value. How is this any different from a Charlie McAvoy?
That's a good point. I don't really have a counterpoint other than, God, I hate it. It feels so wrong. This is no
different than Charlie McAvoy or Tyson Barrie to me.
You're right. Well, the one thing I would say is I think Subban has a better chance of finding his way back up there, but at this point, they're seeming willing to play just about anybody above him. So clearly they don't like how he's clicking with that top unit.
Yeah, enjoy a fourth power play string defenseman.
Yeah, sucks. Okay, my next one is the Sharks have won 4 in a row. Are we actually seeing them turn it around? And my answer is, I don't think so.
Pretty easy schedule.
Yeah, I was going to say the quality win is against the Preds. But
which to be fair to them, that was a very, very quality win.
But they also prior to that, they gave up 5 goals to the friggin' Wild. I think that might be the only 5-goal game the Wild have scored against a goalie. And then
you're probably right.
Then they played the Oilers, which they've kind of turned. They've been up and down, to say the least. And then also the Blackhawks in that stretch. So beating the Predators and the Oilers are good, pretty good. You know, the Oilers have been. It seems like when Koskinen's in net, they're pretty good, but whatever, I guess. And then the Predators win was definitely solid, but giving up 5 to the Wild just it's just I don't know about that. That's worrying. While you talk about your next take, I'm actually going to look up if the Wild have scored 5 goals in any game prior without empty netters.
You do that. So I'm going to move on, and I'm going to stick in Jersey and the polluted Hudson River and talk about Taylor Hall. So word is that they are not going to be re-signing Taylor Hall. So he is not going to stay in Jersey. So the question is, what do you do? Do you hold him now, or do you try to trade for him, because he might be on a new team? Do you try to trade him away now? What do you do? And my take right now is to not overreact to the news. I don't think you gain anything, honestly, in either direction, whether you're trading for him or trading away. Well, trading for him, you could buy low. If you find an owner that's concerned by that or is frustrated by him, I could see him being a really good buy low at the moment, but I wouldn't sell simply because of this news. I think that if anything, it's probably only good for him. I can't imagine someone acquiring a Taylor Hall and not placing him on a top line. And I would actually argue that one of the teams that probably is most interested in Taylor Hall is the one that gave him up in Edmonton. Can you imagine a Draisaitl, Taylor Hall, McDavid line?
Do you think he goes back though?
I don't know. I think that if anything, I think if the Oilers are in a playoff spot, I could see them trying to get Taylor Hall for a playoff run.
I mean, I get that they would want him, but if I were Taylor Hall, I would not go back to Edmonton. They traded him for Adam Larson. That was just like
I don't think he. But that was a different. That was a different.
That's
GM.
True. That is true.
And you know, I think if anything, he might be looking back and saying, "Oh man, that center is really, really good. I kind of wish I played with him."
I mean, he would be the best wing by such a margin. I mean, again, I'm not including Draisaitl because he takes more draws than McDavid. It's kind of like, who is the center? But yeah. I mean, who's, like I said, I think their best actual true winger is James Neal, which is, I mean, that's telling. I think at this point it might be Cassian, which is insane. That's just
the James Neal with a -10 and 1 assist over his last 9 games.
Yeah, but I mean, you play him with McDavid and Draisaitl. I mean, I don't know. They don't. It's to say they don't have much going for them, right? They've got Cassian, who's the best performing winger probably at this point, but he's basically Pat Maroon, pretty much. So you stick him with McDavid, and you can just smack pucks into him and flop into the net once in a while.
Yeah, but either way, I think the message with Hall is I would not sell, and on top of that, I definitely look at a buy low situation there, or at least feel out the owner that has him.
Yeah, he's not even that low. He's still playing decently, but
yeah, but if from what I've seen on Twitter, people are freaking out about it.
Yeah, it's true.
I don't know why, but it's the same with Kucherov.
All right, my next one is I think the Pens might actually be cursed. Now, I was going to look up the most man games lost, but it's actually harder than I thought it would be over the last few seasons. For this season, it's not. I actually think it is the Pens. I think it's the Pens in the it might be the Oilers or somebody weird like that. But the Pens always seem to lose like their best players. Obviously, like Malkin and Letang are seasonal injuries, but now you've also Murray tends to get injured once in a while. You've got Crosby is now hurt. Hornquist is hurt all the time. Like you talk about the players on that team that you'd own in fantasy. It's Crosby. He's been hurt this season. Malkin hurt this season. Hornquist hurt this season. Letang hurt this season, and then probably Gensel. But Gensel is, I mean, did I just doom him? Maybe he's going to get hurt next game. Who knows? And then Murray gets hurt every once in a while. It hasn't happened yet this season, if I remember right. But I feel like I'm expecting it. I don't know. And Bukestad. But I mean, yeah, he doesn't really matter.
Okay, so my next one here, my last one, is that the Sabres started 9-3, and they've now lost 4 in a row, and they are way out of a playoff spot.
Rip.
Kind of what we said early on in the season was the Sabres can't get anything 5-on-5, and if that doesn't change, they are going to be really bad.
Yep.
And that's happening. They cannot score for their lives.
You also
and
couple that with the fact that Hutton was playing like a Vezina winner, and then
he did.
We got so many questions about
what year too.
Yeah, I know about like how do you value Hutton at this point? It's like I kind of don't. I don't know. I get that he's playing well, but he's never been a starting goalie, really.
He's also older.
Yeah, it's like this. It would be very bizarre for him to suddenly have a good season, but
I think that the Sabres were a little overrated at the beginning, and people ignored the 5-on-5 scoring way too much. I think we were, it was funny to me always because you'd watch like with Victor Olofsson, for example. The thing that was interesting to me is you'd watch analysts at the time, and they praised and talked about it in a positive light that he had only power play goals.
Yeah.
When my whole thought was, that's not good. That's not a good thing from a team perspective, from a player perspective. Like, I want my players scoring 5-on-5. If all you do is score on the power play, then you're just a power play specialist, and you're like James Neal.
He did get 2 points in his last 2 games that are both even strength, though.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about early in the season, during their 9-3 stretch. Like, that whole entire 9-on-3 stretch was carried by the power play and by good goaltending.
Yep.
That's it. And now we're seeing the real Sabres.
I bet bet that Olofsson is going to be a good player for the next at least handful of games. They're playing him 20 minutes, and he gets to play Carolina, who goaltending is always a little bit iffy, Ottawa, Chicago, and Minnesota. So should be a fun little stretch for him.
I have him on my suggestions list today.
Ooh. Okay. Sorry, that was my like pigeon noise, I guess, by accident. Okay, my next one is, and my last one, the 10th of 10 takes, is next week is really, really bad for off nights, like really bad. So if you are dominating, you might want to be looking early for options, because there are no teams that play 3+ off nights. It's one of those weeks where like almost every team plays Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. It's really, really bad. So the only teams that play even 2 off nights are Arizona, the Rangers, Ottawa, and Washington. Washington is probably the best to target if you can. If Verana's available, for example, I think he's a pretty good option, because they play Monday, Wednesday, and then you can swap them out and get an extra start on Friday, and then swap again and get a start on Sunday. So I think if you're going to try to game it as much as you can, Washington is probably the team to target if you can. Otherwise, the rest of them are kind of whichever one you feel like. Like, I'm going to hold on to my Arizona and Ottawa streamers from this week, because this was a good week to stream them anyway, and they got the off nights next week, at least 2 of them, so you get a little bit of bonus from it. And then if you have your Rangers, if you got Strome, you might as well keep hanging on to him, because you get 2 off nights too.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't know where Zibanejad is at in his recovery, so...
Yeah. I'm starting to believe,
we'll
I don't want to, they haven't said what it is, but Gamby mentioned offline that it sounds like a concussion. I'm starting to think that too. It's just, it seems too like nebulous what's actually going on, which always makes me think it's not good. But
It feels like every other time there's a concussion in the NHL. Like they do this every time.
Yeah.
Every time it's an upper body injury, and it's day to day, and then it's actually he's not doing well, not missing this game, and then they're like, okay, this is definitely like not as good as before. We're shutting him down for the week, see how he does, and then it becomes day to day again.
Yeah.
Like this is.
I mean, it's a natural state of things with concussion, right? Because it's like they have to evaluate it constantly because at some point you feel better, or you don't, or whatever, and then so it's kind of hard to figure out when he'll be back. If that is the case, I mean, we're speculating here, but
yeah, total speculation. But I mean, it definitely feels like that, which means pretty much the only reason to bring that up is because if it is a concussion, it's much less of a timetable than like a broken leg or shoulder injury. It's like shoulder injury, whatever, when you're coming back.
Yeah, it's like essentially random.
You just don't know, and you want the player to take his time. So it's it could be whenever. Also, speaking of rough for off nights, this weekend is not great either.
It's so bad. It's so bad for streaming.
Yeah, so let's talk about the schedule, and then we'll talk about what you can do for streaming.
This is going to sound a lot like next week's weekend as well. Yeah. It's the Friday episodes are going to be rough for the next couple of weeks.
Also, if something new we're doing Saturday, we are starting to do a live stream Saturday mornings on YouTube where we're going to sit there and give you suggestions on who to sit start. So pretty much we are completely opening up the chat to questions on who are your hardest sit start decisions and also any other fantasy hockey questions. We'll be on for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. We're going to try to do this every Saturday. And so be sure to join us for that. Pay attention. I think we have it scheduled for 12:30 Eastern this week, so be sure to check in for that, especially with just how many games are going on. A lot of people joined in last week for our first one, and it did really well, and I think this one's going to crush this week, and you guys are going to really like it. And it's another kind of layer of stuff we're adding in terms of all the content. So be sure to check that out on our YouTube if you haven't already. Moving into the weekend schedule, let's talk about teams with good matchups. It's going to be Buffalo, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh's matchups aren't necessarily the easiest, but they're good for fantasy. I think that there's going to be a lot of goals in that Toronto game that Pittsburgh plays. And then teams with bad matchups are Edmonton, Washington, and Calgary. Washington's schedule, the problem is just that I don't think they're going to necessarily lose. I think what's going to end up happening is there's just not going to be a lot of goals for fantasy. I think it's just going to be some very difficult matchups for them. And then teams that play both off days, none. Lovely. Yep. You got to love that for streaming purposes. There are none available. So I'm going to take my first one here, which is both for this weekend, but also mostly for next weekend. And just I think he's a good long-term grab right now while he's playing so many minutes. And that's Victor Olofsson, left wing, right wing, 51% owned. While he's playing 20 minutes a game, he's starting to shoot again. I'm hoping they do that. I'm like maybe they give him a week or two to just kind of run with it and see what happens if you give Victor Olofsson 20 minutes. I would love to see that.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to see him back on the top line and the increased minutes. He's shooting a lot more, which was the whole concern, I think, from a lot of us. Okay, my first one. Honestly, making recommendations for this weekend is super hard because only one team doesn't play on Saturday, so the odds of streaming somebody Saturday is not even possible, pretty much, for any team, unless somehow you have a million Columbus players, I guess. But so my suggestions are mostly going to be about trying to get a start on Friday and then just figuring out who you can get on Sunday because there's not a lot of games there. So my first one is Oscar Lindblom, left wing, 18%, plays against Ottawa on Friday. It's a good matchup. Lindblom and his line with Couturier and Konechny have been pretty hot. He's not a power play point guy, but he's been pretty strong lately. He's been pretty strong like season long. I mean, he's not necessarily a long-term roster guy probably, but he puts in decent peripherals, at least from shots, and he gets points every once in a while. Enough to be worth streaming against probably the worst defensive team in the league.
My next one here is going to be Josh Anderson, right wing, 17%. Now, I agree with Brandon. He called him a drop candidate, I think, this Monday. And I still agree. 17% owned. I think he should still, for the most part, be on the wire, get no points. I don't really like his deployment. But one thing he's recently started doing in the last 14 days or so is he's hitting and shooting a ton. So if you need peripherals, and this is also a little bit for just kind of a future thing. Again, a lot of these suggestions are kind of for both this weekend, but more so, how can this person help you next week? Josh Anderson is a guy who's just, if he continues to hit and shoot like this, he's an incredible, like a specific player to do something. or a specialist rather, in your bangers leagues. So I like Josh Anderson, especially this weekend against St. Louis. I think there's a big opportunity on Friday there to get a lot of peripherals.
Yeah, it's good to see him shooting again. That was the concern. Well, he wasn't doing much when he came back from the injury as far as peripherals, but it's good to see him bouncing back. So he is starting to get more addable in a lot of leagues. All right. My next one is Brian Rust, left wing, right wing, 18% as well. From the Devils, he plays the Devils on Friday. Because of all the injuries, he's going to get pretty good deployment. He's actually going to see some power play time. Again, it's power play too, so whatever. But Rust, I know a lot of people are really high on Rust. I'm not that high on Rust. I already mentioned he was on the unsustainably high list and all that good stuff. But he's going to get reasonable deployment on a good line. And he's super quick. And he's been throwing the body, which is nice too for hits leagues. I don't think this is a long-term hold, but playing against Jersey is a pretty good opportunity to stay hot. And at 18% and left wing, right wing eligibility, I do like him for this weekend, or at least for Friday.
Like Brandon said, he's going to be sticking to his Ottawa streams, and I think that there's a decent one for this weekend. And on top of that, it's good for next week, and that's Nick Paul, center left wing, 3%. Kind of like a Josh Anderson mini, but with more minutes and potentially more points. Doesn't get as many hits, but he is pretty consistent with his hitting. He's getting really good deployment. Finally got an assist again last night. He went a little bit on a little bit of a pointless streak there, but he's also shooting. And so Nick Paul to me is a good guy that's 3% owned, especially good for deep leagues if you need someone who's going to get hits and also potentially get points with good deployment for now.
Yep, I agree with that one. My next one is Jaden Schwartz. Left wing, 38%. He gets to play against Columbus on Friday. He can be a long-term hold as he's been hot for a while. I've actually been rostering him for quite some time in a league that he's actually available in, which I have very few. He's kind of unpredictable as far as shooting goes. I would love to see him shoot more often as he's got a pretty decent shot, but for whatever reason, he seemed to kind of be up and down in that area, but his points have been there. And against Columbus, pretty good matchup, to say the least.
Yeah, I have Jaden Schwartz in all three of my main leagues now. And if you watch Building Winners, you'll know that I have him in all three of
well, then accept my trade for Jaden Schwartz in one of the listener leagues, sir.
I'm not trading with you because you fleece me every time. You take advantage of me. No.
You offered both the trades we made.
Shh. I'm winning the Timo Meier, Andrei Svechnikov one, and we're not talking about it again. My last one here is going to be mostly for next week. It's really just mostly I like him somewhat long term. He's a decent grab. He has a good game next Sunday, and so there's an opportunity to play him next week at the end, and you can use an ad. Now, do you want to stash someone that long? I don't know, but if you have the roster spots, it might be worth it. That's Tyler Bertuzzi, who's left wing, right wing, 53%. Detroit has a ridiculously easy schedule next week, like easy enough to the point that Bertuzzi could potentially start over people that you have. And so that's what I'd take a look at, is see who you have next week benched or even playing, and then take a look at Detroit's schedule. And Bertuzzi may be better than some of the people out there.
Yeah. I'll briefly, I'll give my last one and then I'll talk about to expand a little bit on my 10th take for a second. But okay, my last one here is Linus Ullmark. 9%. He gets a sludge match against Chicago. There's not a lot to kind of recommend on Sunday, but if you're in panic mode and you need another goalie start, Ullmark is probably going to be one of the best ones, which sucks, but that is what it is. Hopefully Buffalo can figure it out. In a sludge match, hopefully there'll be less goals scored, but we'll see. All right, and to talk about, because I said to add players for next week if you have the availability, because there's not a lot going on Sunday. You could pick up a guy like Bertuzzi. You could pick up your streamers for next week, knowing that if you're really going to try to maximize your starts next week, you're going to need as many ad drops as you can get, because there's not a lot of week-long holds. There's nobody playing 3 off nights. So if you can make a couple pickups that'll play Monday, Wednesday, Washington players, or even just a player that'll play Monday, and then continue to swap in next week, you'll have more waiver ads if you start this week, right? If you have 4 a week and you have 2 left on Sunday, might as well use them both early to get your streamers in on Sunday, and then you'll have 4 to work with next week when you want to swap those guys back out.
And this weekend is insane. Next week is insane. Definitely pay attention to the week preview that's going to be coming out, and check out our live stream this weekend. Hopefully we can help you out, because I know even on our own rosters, there's going to be a lot of benching, a lot of decisions to make. So hopefully we can help you out there. So thank you for listening to the weekend preview. We'll catch you, hopefully see you Saturday during the live stream. And if not, we'll catch you Monday for the week preview. Thanks for listening.
Yep. Thanks for listening.